degenerated down into a hairy and not very attractive bunch of Neanderthals without the sobering advice and guidance from you women. And women are our joy. Our first love, of course, was a woman, our mother. And those of us that have been especially fortunate have had a sister, or a daughter, or luckily a mate that we have loved and have been a joy to our lives, and someone to cherish and to adore. But I can't say honestly that it's without its thorns. As that rock song said, every rose has its thorns. Yeah, it's, for example, men, if you surely have encountered this, you find your spouse or a daughter that is somewhat off, just a little bit off, and you ask them what's wrong, and they say nothing. Flash back to those History Channel programs that start to say, Actum Meiden. It's like a landmine field right there. The next few steps that you take will determine your life for the next 6 or 7 weeks. There is no right answer. I tell you that. You can say, oh, that's fine, and go about your way. You've screwed up. And if you press too hard on what is wrong, you will find almost invariably, regardless of whether or not it's due to sunspots, it's your fault. The other problem is that should a disagreement elevate into the status of an argument with you and your spouse or another one, if at some point she says fine, no, by no stretch of the human imagination does that mean fine. It means that you're a complete idiot, and that she is finished talking with you about this subject, and that if you take anything to heart, you should shut up right now. If you propose to her some foolish course of actions like buying a boat, buying a motorcycle, that's very popular, and she says, go ahead. It's not permission, it's a dare. She just wants to see what's going to happen. And then when she surveys the damage that you created, she says, wow, that's not an appreciation. That's simply saying, my mother was right, I should have married that dentist. And so, again, but on the other hand, is there anything more soul-enriching for us men to see a well-dressed woman with shapely ankles and a pair of expensive pumps on a summer's day? You women are joys. In fact, there's one poem of Robert Burns. He was the master of the pickup line, but this one is terrific. To see her is to love her, and love her forever. For nature made her what she is, and never made another. You can't beat that. I mean, Helen of Troy was so famous for being beautiful that she launched 1,000 ships. I find it hard to believe that Hercules had that same reaction.
She launched
gentlemen, sons of Scotland, be upstanding. Charge your glasses. To the lassies.
To the lassies.
Thank you, Todd, and well spoken as well. I think.
Well, in the spirit of poet Robert Burns, I will be delivering my response in poetry. A toast to the laddies. Well, what's not to love? Each night I give thanks to the good Lord above for the sweet scruff of stubble that grazes my cheek, for the scent of cologne that makes my knees weak, for kilted elegance, for Celtic style, for the mischief of a wicked smile. Second only to the grand divinity is the sizzle of sweet masculinity. Of course, my man is the grandest, though I don't mean to boast. 'Tis to all you fine laddies that I lift up this toast.
With miser care, time but the impression stronger makes, as streams their channels deeper wear. My Mary, dear departed shade, where is thy blissful place of rest? Seest thou thy lover lowly laid? Hear'st thou the groans that rend his breast? Thou fair Eliza, 1791. Turn again, thou fair Eliza, find blink before we part. Rue on thy despairing lover, canst thou break his faithful heart? Turn again, thou fair Eliza, if to love thy heart denies. Oh, in pity hide the sentence under friendship's kind disguise. Thee, sweet maid, hey I offended? My offense is loving thee. Canst thou wreck his peace forever? Will thine would gladly die? While the life beats in my bosom, thou shalt mix in ill cathrow. Turn again, thou lovely maiden, a sweet smile on me bestow. Not the bee upon the blossom, in the pride of sinning move, not the little sporting fairy all beneath the simmer moon, not the minstrel in the moment, fancies lightens in his eye, kens the pleasure, feels the rapture that thy presence gives to me. The flowery banks of Crete, written in 1794. Here is the glen, and here the bower, all underneath the birch and the shade. The village bell has tolled the hour, for what can stay my lovely maid? 'Tis not Maria's whispering call, 'tis but the balmy breathing gale, mixed with some warbler's dying fall, the dewy star of Eden to hail. It is Maria's voice I hear, so calls the woodlark in the grove, his little faithful mate to cheer, at once his music and his love. And art thou come, and art thou true? O welcome dear to love and me, and let us all our vows renew along the flowery banks of Crete.
Why be organised? E. Roderick Sanborn, ladies and gentlemen. Fabulous presentation, sir. Very well done as ever. Okay, to present the immortal memory, John Hannah is a retired journalist, a lifelong student of Burns, indeed. His first Burns supper in which he appeared, he offered the toast to the lassies at just the age of 15.
Wow, you couldn't even drink.
He was born in Stanley, near Perth, in Scotland. We had a bit of a concern over that because I assumed he meant the one in Australia, and he put me right straight away. And he was the Los Angeles bureau chief of People magazine for 20 years. He's pursued celebrities far and wide in that capacity. Now the only celebrity he follows is a dead one. Ladies and gentlemen, John Hannah.
Gregor.
Thank you, everybody. It's great to be here. Thank you, David, for thinking of inviting me. Thank you, Tom Mayer from Chieftain, and his lovely wife, Jennifer. And how nice to see a lot of well-kept faces here tonight. The old guard, indeed. Right. Oh, would some power the gifted gie us to see ourselves as others see us. Anyone not understand that? Of course not. He's always accessible. Robert Burns is always accessible, as Roderick just demonstrated, masterful readings, proving something that's very important. You don't have to be a Scots person to love Burns or to be able to recite him with power and passion. You did it very well, thank you. Right, in the past, this speech was usually the People magazine version, right? It's about the character and the soap opera life of Robert Burns, right, and songs. He wrote some 560 poems and about 300 songs. He refused to take a penny for any of his songs because, he said, the songs belong to Scotland. Now, imagine the publishing on Auld Lang Syne. Be a millionaire, but of course he died penniless, in debt. He had a very long marriage to Jean Armour. His name has also become a byword for philandering, too. He fathered 12 children, 9 of them on Jean, and at least 3 of them on other women. His last extramarital affair in Dumfries, in fact, with a barmaid, produced a wee girl, and Jean took the baby in and reared her as her own. And she was famous for saying, "Oh, Robbie should have had 12 wives." She was probably very tired when she said that. He died at the age of 37, not of drink or dissipation, some people like to think, but of endocarditis. And yet for some of us here, and for Scots of all kinds, all over the world, Robert Burns is a living presence. So every year we celebrate his birthday, like this. He is literally the most celebrated poet in history. He is an immortal. Now, what made him immortal? It's not his charisma, or his character, or his soap opera private life. It's his art. Empires fall, religions change, philosophies are revised, landscapes evolve, species become extinct. Art alone survives the ages unchanged, and art confers a form of immortality on those who create it. And it's his art that I'll be talking about tonight. But first of all, let's get to know you. How many are here from Scotland? Yeah, good. Contingent over here. Noisy, boozy crowd. Right. How many have visited Scotland? Excellent, right? Okay, right. And how many carry Scotland in their heart and in their DNA? Right. So it's Burns night. That makes a full house. And on Burns night, everybody's a Scot. So everybody's a Scot tonight. Anybody know Glasgow? Yeah. Thought you might. Edinburgh. Yeah. This is great. Yeah. Oh, good. How about Dunkeld? How about Capeth? Eric, you must have been to Capeth at least once. Right? Don't worry, it's a very wee place by the River Tay. And half the people there aren't sure where they live either. So but Capeth is where, as a child, I spent many, many happy minutes. Because that's how childhood happiness is measured in Scotland, or it used to be, by the minute. The rest of the time was, I bring it up because that's where I learned that different folk speak different kinds of English and different kinds of Scots. The way you sound in Scotland and same in England, right, reveals a huge amount about you. Right? It says where you come from. It says what your education was, what your class is, your social class, and what your ambitions are. And that's just the start. Now, quick story. Everybody likes a funny story. Capeth, since we're talking about Capeth, used to have a minister, and his name was William Bell. William Clinkham Bell. That was his. And he was famous for his eccentricities, right? He liked a dram, right? He liked to shoot grouse, had very strong opinions about football team, right? Not to mention, she told me not to, Rangers, mention football teams. Right? But, and he also had an irrational dislike of anything and anyone from south of the border. He'd never let a Sunday sermon pass without a dig at England. This was fine until maybe about 1950, when the old laird died and his son moved into the castle. That would be Murphley Castle. just by caper. The new laird had been educated at Eton, where he learned to love the English. He was determined to clean up Mr. Bell's act, and he called him up to the castle and said, "Mr. Bell, I have friends coming down from Oxford this weekend." Down from Oxford. "So I'd be obliged if you would not mention the English in any way in your sermon. Can you do that for me? There's a good fellow." So Craig Bell had no choice but to comply. And come Sunday, word had got round, so the kirk was crammed. It was poaching in there. There must have been, 30 people in there. At least. Right? The laird and his posh friends in the family pew. The congregation was hushed. And Mr. Bell, and by the way, Janet, what reminded me of this tonight was that Bible that you brought with us. Right? I thought, well, that's a good story. Mr. Bell read from it being Easter, read from Matthew 26, not 2 Corinthians. Matthew 26, which, as we all know, is that moving and awful scene when our Lord broke bread for the last time with his disciples. And he read, "Now, when the even was come, our Lord sat down with the 12, and as they did eat, he said, Verily I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me. And they were exceedingly sorrowful, and began every one of them to say unto him, Lord, is it I? And he said, Woe unto that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It had been good for that man if he had never been born. And his gaze fell upon Judas Iscariot, who gazed right back at him and said, Go blimey, Gavin, don't look at me like that. No, I'll never wrap you up, you know that, right? See what I mean? To see yourselves as others see us. These are wise words, not an easy thing to do, to see yourself as others see us on a personal level, but on a national and international level, as I'm sure our lovely German friend will agree. Right? We know only too well how others see us. The kilt, the tartan, the bagpipes, Eric, the sword dance, the whiskey, perhaps even the blue face paint. That's a dead giveaway, the blue face paint. But this image of Scotland, right? Did any of you guys from Glasgow grow up running around, you know, the back close in your kilts with your broads? Oh, you did, yeah. Bad example. Right. This is really a Highland caricature. And Sir Walter Scott is to blame. Right? He popularised this image in the early 1800s, rather cynically as it happens, because it was a way really of negotiating or rehabilitating Scottish culture after Culloden. Right? When nobody liked the Scots after Culloden. But this Highland image persists because we like it. It's sexy. And it also makes a lot of money, right? That's why we do it. But if Robert walked in tonight, if Burns walked in tonight, right, he'd think, my God, what are all these tutors doing here? Tutors, that's tough guys, Highlanders, right? Right? But Robert was, like most Scots, a lowlander. He never wore the kilt, right? Never played the pipes. The fiddle was his instrument. He may have written that his heart was in the Highlands, and at times I'm sure it was, but every other part of him remained resolutely in the lowlands for most of his life. He did owe a debt to the Highlands. He loved the doomed Highland Mary Campbell, right? And to the end of his life, Gaelic music sang in his soul and in his songs. He had no Gaelic himself. What he spoke and wrote was Scots, right? And English, like any lowlander at the time, and now he was bilingual. Now, some people imagine that Scots is just a dialect of English, and to them I draw on my vast store of erudition and say, I want bile your head. Scots and English are two entirely different languages. They share common Anglo-Saxon roots, During the Middle Ages, Scots was the language of kings and poetry and politics. But by Robert's time, it had lost much of its status, due mostly to the 1707 Act of Union and the James VI Parliament flitting south to Westminster. Educated and ambitious Scots took lessons in those years to try to learn to speak proper English. And there were accent entrepreneurs, carpetbaggers, flocking north to Edinburgh to teach the Scots how to speak English like English people. And most of these entrepreneurs were, of course, Irish. Now, Scots itself is a powerfully expressive tongue. I just bought the Scots Thesaurus. Anyone ever seen that? Interesting book. Right? I looked it up. It has 20,000 entries of Scots words. Right? Has 53 words for drunk. Right? And I think another 50 for tipsy. Has 60 for disagreement. Love that one. No, you don't. Yes, I do. And here's a good one. Has more than 80 words for rain alone. And snow is about another 80. And I don't know about you, but when we're stuck on the side of the A9 in the snow, we actually come up with a few new ones too. It's a very tactile language, right? Well suited to expressing feelings and physical sensations. Robert often used English to express lofty ideas, and Scots when it was time to get down and dirty. Now, when poems, chiefly in the Scottish dialect, came out in 1786, an English reviewer sniffed, "We much regret that these poems are written in some measure in an unknown tongue." This, of course, is absolute nonsense, or cousclite, as my Aberdeen granny would say. The unknown tongue, the Scots language, was and is perfectly well known north of the border. And Robert's poetry covers the entire range and register of English and Scots spoken at that time. He was as comfortable with Augustan English in the Edinburgh salons and just as comfortable in the pubs and the Caliers of Ayrshire with the local dialect. He played all these registers with perfect pitch, and he used it to reach Scots of all social levels, very often in the same poem. Now, this capacity to draw on two parallel languages simultaneously, known as heteroglossia, if you're a linguist, right, was often said to be the key to Robert's poetic wizardry. In fact, I've said it myself. But it's not the whole story, right? The real key in appreciating Burns's language is in its musicality. He was deferential about his own musical talent. His school teacher, Murdoch, said that his voice was untunable, and he was kind of an okay fiddler, he said. But he lived and breathed music. And language became for him a variety of spoken music. If you approach his poetry as music, not as a foreign language in need of translation, it will soon open its richness to you. Now, what that means is this. You'll never get the best of Burns if you leave him on the page. Simply reading Burns is like reading about sex. You know, it's interesting, but it's nowhere near as good as doing it out loud. And I encourage you all to do that. I mean, recite Burns out loud, of course. He's meant to be heard. He's meant to be recited, to be performed as a kind of music. You don't have to be a Scot. Roderick, wonderful. After all, you don't have to be English to do Shakespeare, right? You just have to be a lover of language, music, and poetry. Now, most of the vocabulary of music applies quite well to Burns's poetry. Rhythm, melody, assonance, dissonance, even harmony. You'll take something like Ye banks and braes of bonny Doon, how can ye bloom sae fresh and fair? How can ye chant, ye little birds, when I'm so weary, full o' care? Now, full o' care, it means full, of course. But in Scots it also means drunk, right? As in the well-known phrase, "Can I see your driver's licence? Are you full, sir?" And in French, Burns spoke French quite well. It means insane, fou, crazy, right? So there we are, a triple resonance of one small word. Full, drink, and crazy. A visceral evocation of overpowering heartache, like 3 notes harmonizing in a chord. And you can find this harmonic effect in hundreds of his lines. It was second nature to him. And, while we're at it, Banks' Embrace is not written in an unknown tongue. It's English that's been Scotified with spellings and elisions. Burns wanted, at times, for his poems to seem to be Scots, while still being understandable to non-Scots. Now, in Tam O'Shanter, which is, 260 lines or something, he's all over the place. He changes and shifts register according to the demands of the story, right? Like, he gave it very English at the beginning. He says, but pleasures are like poppies spread. You seize the flower, its bloom is shed. Or like the snow falls in the river, a moment white, then melts forever. Or like the borealis race that flits ere ye can point a place. Or like the rainbow's lovely form, vanishing amid the storm. Right? Very high-flown prose, that. Maybe with a touch of sarcasm in it. And then there's a shift back into broader Scots in the next line. Nae man can tether time nor tide. The hour approaches, calm, morn ride. That hour when night's black arch the keystone, that dreary hour, Tom mounts his beast in, and sick and nachty takes the road in, as ne'er poor sinner was abroad in. And a few lines later, he's at his best. He's in his stride when the action heats up. And he takes advantage of the unique tonal qualities of Broad Scots. When Tam finds himself at the ruined kirk, and he peers in through the window, and he sees the witches dancing, and he sees the bagpipe playing devil in the corner, we get this scene. A winnock bunker in the east, there sat all Nick, in shape a beast, a towsy tyke, black, grim and large. To you the music was his charge. He screwed the pipes and gart them skirl, the roof and rafter, oh, the dirl. Dirl. That's not an English word that comes close to that. Does it resonate? Oh, did it resonate? Does it reverberate? No, it dirls. You can hear it in your ears, right? So given the choice between an English and a Scots word, Robert usually went for the one that made the most sense musically, even if it meant a hiccup in comprehension for some people, as in To a Mouse, for example, mostly English, except for the famous line, a daemon icar in a thrave. Right? In Ayrshire agricultural patois, that means the odd ear in a sheaf. So the old gang in Mauchline, back in Ayrshire, loved that. That was a bit of their life in there, right? And there's plenty in the poem to satisfy the educated Edinburgh gang too, right? And of course, towards the end, the best laid schemes of mice and men gang after gley. They do not go often astray, ladies and gentlemen. They gang after gley, because after gley has a doom-laden inevitability to it that is deep in the Scottish soul. To a Mouse, his most famous poem, is classic Burns. Right? It takes a tiny incident, right? A mouse getting torn out of its nest by the plough. He evokes that scene with a crystal clarity, and then he uses it as a lens to conjure up a truth of universal, of metaphysical dimension. A wee mouse's emergency becomes a meditation on time, the present moment, mortality, the fate of the human soul. Now, most of us spend our time imagining tomorrow and replaying yesterday. A good poem is a dose of reality, as an old professor friend of mine used to say. A good poem is a slap in the kisser joint. It wakes you up to the present. This is the value of poetry, because the present is the only place where feeling and understanding and appreciation and, well, growth can take place. True Louse, which I'm about to recite here to finish with, and by the way, it's all printed if you want to follow along, right, is a companion piece to the Mouse. And here the spectacle of a tiny, ambitious parasite on a lady's hat, a kind of Sir Edmund Hillary of the insect world, becomes a meditation on human vanity. You imagine the scene. Everyone went to church in those days. It was a break from the daily routine, and it gave young men and women the opportunity to meet each other socially. The lassies dressed in their finery, and the laddies gazed, their thoughts far from pure, whatever the sentiment was. And here's lovely Jeannie Marklin in her new bonnet, right? Fully conscious of Rabbit Moskale's smouldering stare, unaware that he's following the progress of a louse as it clambers up her hat. Now, if you're not familiar with the vocabulary, that's fine. Just let it flow over you, as I said, like music. You'll know you're getting the right idea if you start to itch. So if you see anyone scratching on it, get it. There he is. Where are you going, you crowling fairly? Your impudence protects you, surely. What can I say but your strength middle or goes at least? Though faith, I fear you, dying but sparely on sick a place. You ugly, creeping, blasted wonder, detested, shunned by saint and sinner. How dare you set your foot upon her, say fine a lady? Go somewhere else and seek your dinner on some poor body. Swith, in some beggar's half at squattle, we other kindred jumping cattle. There you may creep and crawl and sprattle in shoals and nations, where horn nor bane ne'er door unsettle your thick plantations. Now, hold you there, you're out of sight, below the fatrals snug and ticked. Nah, faith ye, you'll no be wrecked till you've got on it, the very topmost tower and hecht of Mrs. Bunnet. My soothricht, ball you say your nose out, as plump and grey as only grows it. Oh, for some rank mercurial roset, or fell red smedum, I'd gie you sick a hairy dose it, would dress you drodum. I wouldn't have been surprised to spy you on an old wife's flannin toy, or ablin some bit duddy boy on some wiley coat. But Mrs. Fine Lunatic, fie, how dare you do it? Oh, Jeannie, dinna toss your head and set your beauties all abreed. You dinna ken what cursed speed the blasties making. They winks and finger ends are right read. Her notice taking. Would some power the gifted gie us to see ourselves as others see us? It would fae only a blunder frae us, and foolish notion what airs and gait and dress would leave us, and even devotion. Thank you. I'm about done. Just give me 30 seconds. So Walter Scott made Highland culture presentable by dressing it up in bright fabrics and romantic myth. He gave that image to the world, and it became how many others see us and how on nights like this we like to see ourselves. But Burns did something more profound. He taught us how to see ourselves, not as others see us, but as we really are, as Scots, as brothers and sisters, as lovers and beloved, as human beings bonded in our transience with each other and with all living things, to see ourselves as fellow mortals. He gave a unified voice to all Scottish culture, Highland, Lowland, rural, urban, peasant, aristocrat, intellectual and numpty alike. I believe that his poems and songs crystallise for us our identity, our true national characters. And so, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invoke the spirit of Robert Burns tonight in the words of an English poet. Please be upstanding. His presence haunts this room tonight, a form of mingled mist and light from that far coast. Welcome beneath this roof of ours. Welcome, that vacant chair is yours, dear guest and ghost, Robert Burns. Thank you.
Two or two tickets, they're out.